Afghanistan, Abiogenic oil, and the pipeline that never was. So with the U.S. leaving Afghanistan now in the news, I thought I would discuss something that gets discussed in a certain way and put it in a different way. So for a very long time, way back to the 1990s, there have been proposals to build a pipeline from Turkmenistan. This is Turkmenistan. This is Afghanistan here. This is the Indian Ocean. So the pipeline would extend from natural gas-rich Turkmenistan down through Afghanistan. Usually in the plans it's through Herat and Kandahar, and then it goes somewhere in Pakistan, and generally to the Indian Ocean or possibly India. And there is actually an ongoing plan to do this. Supposedly they're going to build it in 2021 or 2022. It's been proposed for a long, long time, and it has been suggested as the motive for the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan and U.S. presence there and all sorts of machinations there. Let me show this here. Counterpunch. Yeah, for example, this is an article from a while ago, 2001, right after the September 11 invasions, pointing to this project as a hidden agenda in the U.S. invasion. Now, curiously enough, the Taliban, after they took over in the 1990s, were trying hard to get this pipeline built. They were trying to negotiate with Unocal in the United States. They visited Texas or the United States to Unocal, and they got lots of bad press all of a sudden over doing this. U.S. policy began to change. That's against supposedly building the pipeline only when feminists and Greens started campaigning against both Unocal's plans and the government's covert backing for Kabul. Kabul is the Taliban, of course. So let's go back to the map just a little bit longer. Get rid of that. Here's a recent article on the TAPI pipeline. So again, it's a proposal to build a pipeline here from Turkmenistan through Afghanistan to Pakistan and finally either directly to the Indian Ocean or maybe through India or maybe both routes. So I want to put this in perspective and ask the simple question, how the United States, occupying Afghanistan for 20 years, spending, as we'll see, at least $1 trillion, probably more, on Afghanistan, tens of thousands, even 100,000 troops there, all kinds of stuff going on, and somehow the world's largest and wealthiest nation couldn't possibly build a pipeline in a few years from Turkmenistan to the Indian Ocean. And I'll talk about why that might be. I'll present a couple different explanations. I don't know, but I'm going to suggest maybe we really didn't want to build that pipeline. In fact, we didn't want it built at all. But let's see. So let's start here. This is a popularly cited study from Brown University, which actually estimates the cost of the U.S. war in Afghanistan from 2001 to 2021 at $2.2 trillion. That includes interests and sort of iffy things. The direct number for the DoD is probably around $933 billion. This article from the BBC gives a slightly different number. Let's see if I can find it. According to the U.S. Department of Defense, the total military expenditure in Afghanistan from October 2001 until September 2019, okay, that's a year or two ago, was $778 billion. Now, generally, these numbers are fiddled with creatively to try to keep the absurd costs down. So it's probably at least $1 trillion, and it could be a couple trillion, even more, depending on how you figure things. So think about that. It actually doesn't cost anywhere near $1 trillion to build a pipeline from Turkmenistan to the Indian Ocean. That's an incredibly large amount of money. To give you some idea, okay, that's $1 trillion there. There are about 39 million people estimated to live in Afghanistan. That represents over $25,000 per Afghan resident today. Actually, that number includes refugees, but Afghans, $25,000 per Afghan was spent. And that works out to over $1,000 per Afghan per year over the 20 years. And yet, despite that, the United States could not build a pipeline that would seem to be in the national interest of the United States, probably be very popular with the people in Afghanistan, and we could have made it very, very popular with the people in Afghanistan. It's actually supported by the Taliban. They wanted to build it back in the 1990s, and they still officially support building that pipeline. We are absolutely bad at this Viking warlord business of stealing other people's oil for some reason, or natural gas. Let me point something out. In the 1970s, the oil companies really wanted an oil and natural gas pipeline in Alaska. So how did they make sure that worked? There's a payment program. Everybody in Alaska gets $1,000 a year from the pipeline. A lot of happy people in Alaska. They like it. They're happy. They're not too unhappy about the pipeline or oil spills and hitting the caribou or the elks or the animals or whatever. That $1,000 a year is very popular. We could presumably do that in Afghanistan. I guess it's actually 40 million people. Okay. Okay, let me take a look here. So what I want to point out is that officially the gross domestic product per capita of Afghanistan is in the range of $500 to $600 per person per year. It's officially a very poor country. You do have to take these foreign trade conversions with caution. Nonetheless, a annual check of, say, $500, for example, would probably go a long ways to making everyone in Afghanistan love that pipeline and love the U.S. And we spent per year on average over $1,000, and that's using the 1 trillion number, by the way, per person in Afghanistan, over $1,000 per year. And we couldn't build the pipeline. We couldn't find a way to take a fraction of the profits or cost of building the pipeline before it starts making money and spreading it around to the people in Afghanistan to make them very happy about it and about us. I also want to point out a pipeline is a fixed pipeline. You can build forts along the pipeline. You can station troops along the pipeline. It's a very well-defined target to protect. You can have fleets of killer drones, which we've been sending all over there to Pakistan and Afghanistan for unclear reasons to bomb poppy fields, wedding parties, and other things. You can have those killer drones fly back and forth day and night. Remember, they're infrared cameras that can see people at night, as well as put sensors and other things along the pipeline. So you can watch that pipeline, protect that pipeline. Very clear military mission. Protect the pipeline. Make it profitable. Take that oil. And yet somehow in 20 years, under multiple administrations, we spent far more than the pipeline would have cost and didn't build the pipeline. We may add that this also extends to claims that there are rare earth minerals in Afghanistan which get talked about but never stolen. They are always staying in the ground in Afghanistan. So let's be clear here. This is nuts. Why would we do this, right? This doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Or does it? So first, we can attribute it to gross incompetence, bungling, a certain amount of petty corruption, a lot of different things. Maybe we really went into Afghanistan due to fear and anger over the September 11 attacks and didn't think through what we were doing or how you, really either would get support, but at least how you would get that oil for our supposedly oil-hungry gas companies like Unocal, right? Okay. We can't rule that out. Incompetence is a possibility, and variations on incompetence and nuttiness and so forth, they do occur. Nonetheless, you might wonder why the United States, with spending over $1 trillion over 20 years, can't build a pipeline. Really might wonder. So what might be the reason for that? Could there be a hidden agenda why we don't want a pipeline from Turkmenistan? Sure. What happens if we build the pipeline and it works? More natural gas in the global markets, lower price for natural gas and oil, and pushes down energy prices. There are lots of energy producers, as a matter of fact, that won't benefit from that. Their price of the oil, natural gas, nuclear power, whatever it is they happen to sell, will go down. And in fact, we know from history there have been numerous examples of overt and covert collusion between oil producers, nations, in the form of OPEC, for example, to reduce the production of oil, natural gas, etc., for the purpose of driving up the price and making more money. So there certainly is a history of people doing this. Here in the United States, The Texas Railroad Commission was used way back, I believe, in the 1930s to reduce oil production in Texas to keep the price of oil high, which worked out well for many oil producers. Not everybody, of course. So there's a motive, without going any deeper, why someone might not want a pipeline built from Turkmenistan to the Indian Ocean. Why, for example, you could wonder about what happened when we invaded Iraq and their entire oil production was apparently offline for several years. When we invaded Libya and blew up the country, presumably knocking out their oil production for at least a while, probably to the present day, or currently in Syria. Somehow, these attempts to steal the oil, the natural gas, the vital resources go strangely awry, and they don't look like stealing the oil. They look like destroying the oil, getting it off the markets. Well, why might this be the case? We usually are taught that oil is fossil oil, fossil fuel. Okay, sounds maybe reasonable. It's what you're taught in school. I, in fact, was taught that it was, pressure-cooked plants and dinosaurs. That's no longer the theory, and it can't possibly be pressure-cooked dinosaurs and plants. We know that now. We think it's now pressure-cooked bacteria. Now think for a minute how rare fossils are. Petrified trees, fossils of dinosaurs, it's very rare to find them. And what you find enormous quantities of oil all over the place, enormous quantities of natural gas all over the place, several miles beneath the Earth's surface. How did it get down there? Well, there is, as it happens, an alternative theory of the origin of oil and natural gas, and that is that it's from the formation of the planet, from the planetary nebula, which is mostly methane. In the West, in the United States, the late Thomas Gold is the most well-known proponent of this theory, which is actually quite old and was known and is believed in the former Soviet Union, Russia, etc. for a long time. And he wrote a book where you can find a lot about this theory called the Deep Hot Biosphere. And one of the things he concluded is it was likely that living organisms, life, originated underground in this primordial oil and natural gas, and therefore it should be full of live bacteria and other things, and we keep finding more and more evidence of that. This is an article on that here from a few years ago. And just to plug myself, I've been interested in this theory for a long time, and one of the things it would predict is that the planet Mars should contain oil and natural gas buried underneath the surface. Very unlikely it wouldn't be there if this theory is basically correct. Probably other bodies like the moon, etc. So we might expect methane in the Martian atmosphere, and sometimes there's evidence of that. It's very mysterious. I don't claim to know whether there's really oil and natural gas on Mars, but this theory would suggest that's extremely, extremely likely. Here's an article I did on this and how we might look for oil and natural gas on Mars. And here is an interview I did several years ago on whether there's methane on Mars, whether it's life, covering this topic. So I put these here both to promote myself and to point out that I've actually studied this issue, and there's lots of reason to think oil and natural gas is primordial material from the formation of the planet. That means there could be an awful lot of oil and natural gas. Far from being in short supply, it actually could be all over the place. And of course that the producers have historically gotten together to fix the price of oil, to restrict output, as in the Texas Railroad Commission and in OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. And there have been other deals over the years that we know about, and circumstantial evidence of others, which would be probably illegal, for example. We can see there might be interests that really want to reduce the production, distribution, and refining of natural gas, oil, etc. Because if it was all being pumped out rapidly, the prices would drop and their profits would drop, and they might even go out of business. So perhaps that has something to do with how we are so incapable of building a pipeline from Turkmenistan through Afghanistan to Pakistan to the Indian Ocean, how we managed to spend at least $1 trillion occupying a nation for 20 years, spending probably way more per person in that country than it would have cost to build the pipeline or to spread money around from the profits of the pipeline. How is it we couldn't do this? That's a question we should all be asking a lot. Everyone should be asking. How is it the U.S., spending $1 trillion, can't build a pipeline from Turkmenistan through Afghanistan to the Indian Ocean, which would be a win-win for almost, or could be, if it was properly done, a win-win for just about everybody, except maybe a few oil producers. So I leave you with that question. How is it this pipeline is never built? This concludes this video presentation. If you like this video, please click like. Please click subscribe and the notification bell if you would like to receive more content from us. You can avoid internet censorship by subscribing directly to our RSS news feed. Please consider sharing the link by email and on your website or blog, in addition to liking, upvoting, or sharing on increasingly censored, advertising beholden, big company social media. We have encountered such censorship. Mathematical software is developing algorithms and software to automate data analysis, reducing the risks of costly errors and increasing the predictive power of the results. You can support our work financially by subscribing on our Patreon page, https://www.patreon.com/mathsoft, or scanning the QR code in the lower right corner.